Thursday, October 3, in the year of our Lord 2024. We are on the brink of something very, very big in the Middle East and for the world. New York Times headline, after missile attack, Israel may be ready to risk all-out war with Iran. Indeed, I think it is. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, they've added another division of the IDF. The 36th Infantry Division has joined the 98th Paratroop Division in southern Lebanon. Trey Yinks is doing amazing reporting for Fox News, and if you're following my X feed at Hugh Hewitt, you'll be able to find, I posted it yesterday, I've interviewed some extraordinary war correspondents over the 25 years of this program. Dexter Filkins, John Fisher Burns, Tom Ricks, they've gone all over the world. Trey Yinks is the equal of them. He's in the tunnels of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, continuing attacks on selected strikes in Beirut, and what Israel decides to do in response to the second ballistic missile attack on it by Iran over the last few days is up to Israel, of course. Joe Biden has screwed it up, but nobody's listening to Joe Biden, nor should they listen to Joe Biden. However, Danny Danon is the representative of Israel at the United Nations Security Council, and he spoke yesterday, cut number 36.
Iran's mask has fallen completely. They are no longer the puppet masters hiding behind Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations. They said that, and I quote, that they are taking revenge for Nasrallah elimination. Iran has assumed responsibility for Hezbollah's attacks and are directly responsible for all the violence we have seen. The truth is out now. Iran stands fully exposed as a terror state orchestrating this chaos. Iran's attempt to disguise its violence in the language of legality is a vile distortion, and the world must not be fooled. What happened last night in Israel was not a defensive action of Iran. It was a calculated attack on a civilian population. Israel will not stand by in the face of such aggression. Israel will respond. Our response will be decisive. And yes, it will be painful. But unlike
decisive
Iran,
and painful. So I am keeping my eye on the Jewish News Service, jns.org, on the Times of Israel, on Jerusalem Post, and of course on X, to find out beyond the additional bits of briefings, such as 60 Hezbollah terrorists were killed yesterday, 8 Israeli soldiers died yesterday, 7 died the day before in a terror attack originating in the West Bank with Iranian weaponry and payment. I have been listening to everything I can, and I'll bring you up to speed as it happens. It is a significant weekend. Of course, many are urging in Israel, urging the Prime Minister and the Security Cabinet to hit Iran hard. Their nuclear sites, where they have been in violation of international law for a long time, hit their oil export sites, hit the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Remember, they sent 180 missiles, and they sent another 100 missiles earlier this year. So if Israel chooses to be proportionate, it will only send 300 missiles. But the Iranians attempted to hit the Dimona nuclear site, where Israel retains its nuclear arsenal, allegedly. They've never said so publicly. They did hit Air Force bases. There are lots of targets for Israel, and Israel can get there, and Israel will get there. And if it happens during the program, I'll tell you about it. Also, we've got news from the campaign trail. I spent most of yesterday, except for lunch, with Professor Norkey down at University of Maine Law School. He's an old friend of mine. I've known him since first grade. And it's funny, he ended up being a law professor on the East Coast, and I'm a law professor on the West Coast. But we were having a wonderful lunch yesterday. I kept checking, though, the Twitter feed to find out if Israel had attacked. All I found, though, is that our semi-president, because it really is sad what is happening to the president, he is incapacitated a lot of the time. He shuffled off of Andrews tarmac yesterday and spoke to the press. Someone asked him, should Israel respond in kind? Should it hit the nukes? Cut number 38.
Sir, can I ask you, what is your support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. I think there's things. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, that they should respond and enforce it.
All 7 of us agree they have a right to respond, but they shouldn't hit the nuclear sites. It's just crazy. It's not up to him. It's not up to the seven. I don't know who the seven are. I assume four of them are the president, Vice President Harris, who's kind of, what's going on here? She gave one of the most bizarre statements about this, halting, reading it, can't look at the camera, can't be decisive. Maybe Tim Walz has been consulted, I don't know. But Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, we're on the cusp of something enormous, and I'm following it. Into this, by the way, an almost funny, were it not so blatantly an attempt to interfere with the election, the fanatic old Javert of America, Jack Smith, filed some allegedly incendiary bits of evidence with Judge Chutkan in D.C. under seal, and she dramatically unsealed it yesterday. I think in a pretty naked attempt to take the spotlight off of Tim Walz, who melted under the heat. And I think actually, after listening to yesterday, the assessment far and wide of what happened at that debate, that it may have actually moved the needle. Mostly vice presidential debates do not move the needle, mostly at the margin at all. But I think the contrast between J.D. Vance, a new generation, strikingly poised, strikingly smart, and Tim Walz, buffoonish in Buffalo, I should say, was everywhere noted by everyone, except Politico, which said his bulging eyes were really a sign of passion, and that J.D. Vance's beard is transgressive against women's rights. Really, they did. Some nutter over at Politico, some left wing. It's just gone off the left edge. But everywhere except MSNBC and Politico, they all unanimous. J.D. knocked him out. If it was a fight, they would have stopped it. Good for you, Senator Vance. Donald Trump went on Dave Ramsey now, and Kamala Harris went on CBS Pittsburgh with Joe Delaney. And the latter is almost like, here's Kamala Harris being asked by a local guy, Joe Delaney, very famous in Pittsburgh, about the Middle East. Cut 44.
We must all agree that it is in the best interest of the United States, much less our allies, Israel, to ensure that Iran not have the ability to do what it was attempting to do today. It is in American interest to make sure that we take seriously the threat Iran, that it poses not only to our interest, to our personnel, and into stability in that region, both Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. And we will be unwavering, I will be unwavering in my commitment to Israel's ability to defend itself and to take seriously the need to deal with Iran in terms of the threat that it poses to
what does it?
US
It doesn't
interests,
mean anything. It's a word salad. She's caught out. She has no idea how to respond. It's a local guy. She was expecting to talk about how she liked the Steelers and all that kind of, and she ends up with a word salad about seriously, we got to take Iran seriously, but she will not say, hit them hard, hit them fast, hit them where it hurts. If they want to hit the nuclear program and they think they can, fine. Set back Iran, because we certainly have dropped the ball. I wouldn't expect her to say the last thing, but they have dropped the ball. She also went to the Georgia flood zone yesterday, cut number 48.
And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750 for folks who need immediate needs being met, such as food.
I don't know how they came up with $750, but here's $750, flood victim. I'm Kamala Harris, and I paid for this message. The response of the federal government is nothing short of shameful. Trust the Salvation Army, trust Team Rubicon. They are on the ground. They are helping the people. It is a devastation in places like Asheville that I would not have imagined. It's only recently that we're getting the kind of pictures. I've got Jonathan Howard of the Florida State Guard Special Missions Unit, and he cannot believe what's going on there. I can't play it. It's kind of profanity. He just, where are the feds, is what he's saying over and over again. Meanwhile, Tim Walz is criticizing Donald Trump for paying for a single mom's groceries at a campaign stop. Cut number 49.
We're talking about these prices and we're doing things. I saw a photo op of Donald Trump a few weeks ago, and he was in a grocery store. And he pulled out money to pay for a woman's grocery store. Look how generous he was on this. I would bet you any amount of money that's the first time he's been in a grocery store since 1985. I guarantee you that. He's never been in that grocery store.
I just think it's very funny that Tim Walz gets whacked in the debate. and I mean whacked in the debate. And he comes up with Donald Trump buying groceries for a single mom. That's his response. He's truly an embarrassment to the ticket, and more has been rolling out on his trips to China, on his serial exaggerations is the generous way to put it. This is a terrifying moment for Iran, writes Arash Azizi in The Atlantic. Khamenei has long pursued what he calls a no peace, no war strategy. Iran supports regional militias opposed to Western interests and the Jewish state, but avoids actually getting into a war. The approach was always untenable, but Iran is not ready for an all-out war. Its economically battered society does not share its leaders' animus towards Israel. Its military capabilities don't even begin to match Israel's sophisticated arsenal. Iran lacks significant air defense capabilities on its own, and Russia has not leapt to complement them. We don't have a blanking air force, a source in Tehran close to the Iranian military told me under condition of anonymity for fear of reprisal. Of the attack on Israel, he said, I don't know what they are thinking. Here is what they were thinking. They were thinking that Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Kamala Harris could stop, because they're appeasers, could stop Israel from responding. But there is no appetite for appeasement in Israel. There isn't. There's going to be a response. It's going to be big. They got them to, quote, take the win once when Joe Biden was marginally competent. Now he is not. He's lost capacity. He's so fragile. It's so sad. But he's out there. Meanwhile, Douglas Murray, the English commentator on all things everywhere all the time, and he's really the new Hitch, joined Barry Weiss on the Honestly podcast yesterday and said what I think almost every serious person in the world thinks. Cut number 51.
It's possible once again to see what the Middle East could look like if these two delusions fell away. If instead of everyone obsessing about the Palestinians getting another state, they thought about improving the living conditions of the Palestinians. If instead of talking about the importance of bringing Iran in from the cold, the mullahs in from the cold, we talked about if Washington had spent 1% of the time it has spent trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of power in Jerusalem, trying to get the mullahs out of power in Tehran, the mullahs would be out of power in Tehran by now. Every American government for 30 years has been trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of office. Bill Clinton sent teams of people over to get Netanyahu to lose the election in the 90s. When Netanyahu says in his memoirs, Bill Clinton calls him up to congratulate him after he wins the prime ministership, gets together the coalition, and Bill Clinton says, well, we did everything we could to keep you out, but we're looking forward to working with you. Okay, but the point is that it has been American government policy to change the prime minister in Israel. Whatever you think of him, he's the one who can put together coalitions. What have they done when the Iranian people took to the streets like in 2009? Nothing. So,
Thank you, Douglas Murray. And nobody cares what Joe Biden thinks in Israel. Like zero. They'll pretend. They'll be diplomatic. Thank you very much. And nobody in America cares what Joe Biden thinks. They worry about what Kamala Harris and Donald Trump think. One of those two people will be president. By the way, the weeping and gnashing on the left yesterday about that wipeout of Tim Walz and the regret. What it showed about Kamala Harris, her inability to judge character and ability would come through in an administration. Kristen Welker on the Today Show, cut number 53 yesterday morning.
And so I was getting texts from Democrats, panicked, quite frankly, who were saying, wow, he's really moderating himself on a lot of these issues. He's the most likable he has ever been.
Yeah, the talking about J.D. Vance doing great. And John King put out the really terrible news for Kamala Harris yesterday, cut number 54.
This is a meeting of the Syrian Students Association at Wayne State in Detroit.
How many are hesitant, having a hard time voting for Harris because of these policies? That's just about everybody.
Trouble for Harris is
Yeah,
also
the
easy
fact
to find.
is, supporters of Israel in Michigan to vote for Trump, and a lot of the Arab Americans are going to vote for Trump because they want peace back in the Middle East. As I told you, former President Donald Trump was on the David Ramsey show yesterday. I like the fact that the former president is out and talking to everyone, including David Ramsey has a huge audience, an incredibly diverse audience. A lot of people want financial assistance. A lot of people want financial advice. A lot of people want to be financially literate. So Donald Trump goes where people are and talks to them. Here is his first cut about working. Cut number 40. She wouldn't come. She got so buffaloed. I'll get to that. By Joe Delaney, who's a nice old guy in Pittsburgh, been around forever. And my people listen on WPIT. You know him. You love Joe. He did as good a job as you can. Let's frickin' frack it. That's old Donald Trump. Here's little Kamala Harris talking to Joe Delaney about fracking in Pennsylvania. Cut number 45. The vice president.
I wanted to ask you, there's a political ad on TV from a 2019 Climate Hall town meeting that you had, in which you basically said, quote, "There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking," unquote. The ad claims that if you're elected president, you will ban fracking and you will cost Pennsylvania over 300,000 jobs. Have you changed your view on fracking? And if so, why?
So let me start by saying that ad, as you described it, is absolutely a mischaracterization that I think is intended to make people
Stop right here.
Of
It's a very simple question. Have you changed your view about fracking? And if so, why? He didn't ask her, what do you think about the ad, Madam Vice President? He said, and Joe, by the way, did what all the king's horses and all the king's men in the Beltway media could not do. A straightforward question about a Kamala Harris flip-flop, and one of crucial importance to my listeners in Pennsylvania and across the country. She was absolutely against fracking in 2019. In the 2020 debate, she said, Joe Biden isn't against fracking. And then we've been told that she's flip-flop. Continue her answer.
My presidency. Let me be absolutely clear, as I've been when I said it back in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I did not as vice president. In fact, I cast the tie-breaking vote to open up more fracking leases. And all
right, let me stop right here. That is a lie. She cast a tie-breaking vote for offshore leases, not fracking in the United States. You understand that? Offshore oil discovery could be drilling could be done under some provisions of that Inflation Reduction Act. I believe that was the tie-breaking vote. It said nothing about fracking in Pennsylvania. Moreover, she doesn't answer the question. Have you changed your position, and if so, why? She does not answer the question. Why? She can't. I want to go back now, contrast this to Donald Trump talking to David Ramsey about taxes, cut number 41.
What we're doing.
All right, now I want to go back and contrast Trump's clarity on the tax cut. He'll extend, revise, and lower tax rates. Cut number 46, Kamala Harris talking to Joe Delaney in Pittsburgh again, and she is very flustered. Cut number 46.
Former President Trump says that you've had 4 years as vice president to do all the things you've promised in the campaign, but haven't done it. Is he right, or did President Biden not give you or limit it in some way your role as vice president?
So let's start with this. I think that the former president is really becoming quite desperate, and is really been offering a lot of misstatements and misinformation. And perhaps it's because he wants to distract from the fact that he has offered no plan for the American people. I have talked about this before. I invite you to go to his rallies, and what you'll hear about full time is him talking about himself and his personal grievances, but what you won't hear him talking about is you and the needs that you have as a working person, as a family person. My plan is about building an opportunity economy where I'm going to give home buyers a
she didn't answer the question. I don't even know why. All glory to Joe Delaney. He tried 3 times to get her, got 10 minutes, tried 3 times to get her to answer something she didn't. Tony Dokoupil, I think I'm saying his name right, CBS Early Show, talking about the vice president and how she's doing in Georgia. Cut 55.
But while Joe Biden won this state in 2020...
So you're voting for Donald Trump?
There are warning lights for Kamala Harris.
I feel like he aligns more with America and American values than she does.
Isaac Simpson explained those Trump values while I made some gains on a delicious potato biscuit and omelet.
I just know that once you start doing away with things like the Second Amendment and altering it to your own, what you think is sensible, then it's a problem. Because then who's the arbiter?
And then Tony talks about Trump and voters in Georgia. Cut 56.
To me, he's more for the people, the hardworking people.
We heard a whole lot of Trump support.
I did like my lifestyle.
Anecdotal evidence is evidence of anecdotes. And so I don't put a lot of stock in it. The polls are Pennsylvania, Cook Political Report, Harris +1. That means they don't know. Wisconsin, Marquette, Harris +4. Again, margin of error. Wisconsin, Trafalgar, Trump +1. Again, margin of error. Wisconsin, Cook, Harris +2, margin of error. Michigan, Cook, Harris +3, margin of error. Michigan, Trafalgar, Trump +2, margin of error. North Carolina, Cook, tie, margin of error. Georgia, Cook, Trump +2, margin of error. It's all margin of error stuff. Pollsters don't know. All they're doing is putting out stuff that people will read, and they don't know. They don't have any idea. They don't know what the turnout model is going to be. All I know is that they are failing. Harris and Biden are failing North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and some parts of Virginia. Here's Jonathan Howard. I think we've edited this. Stand by the beep button. Florida State Guard Special Mission Unit, cut number 50.
I really don't want to make this video, but it is literally a matter of life and death for the people of North Carolina. So, my name's Jonathan Howard. I'm a member of the Florida State Guard Special Missions Unit, and I'm also up here with Aerial Recovery, a nonprofit. I came up here on Sunday with Aerial Recovery before we even got activated. We flew up here, and then we got activated, which was great. I have my team up here working as well. Here's the problem. I'm going to tell you everything that's happening from the ground, what I'm actually seeing, because what they're telling you is complete bull in the news, and these politicians are lying. And I'll say this now, I'll say it at the end of the video. The only thing I need from this video is helicopters. If I have helicopters, I can save lives. Without helicopters, I can't reach these people. It doesn't matter how many chainsaws and trucks I got, I can't get to them. They're 10 miles in, 20 miles, 40 miles in the mountains. There's no way to get with them or even communicate with them. I am literally flying around in a civilian helicopter looking for SOS messages carved in the mud or painted on the ground, and we're dropping down and saving them. What got me fired up about this was yesterday, me and my team did the rescue of that 11-day-old baby. And all these government officials and social media, they're showing that video, that pictures and video of that rescue, and claiming that like they have some like government helped with that. And I mean, even USA, I think it was USA Today, wrote an article about it saying it was a Florida National Guard that went and got it, like with a helicopter. No, it was me, my buddy Charlie, and a civilian named Zeb with his own personal helicopter out of Wilmington, North Carolina. Like without that civilian, that baby would be dead. And the old lady we went and rescued after that, she'd be dead too because she had 1 day left of oxygen. No one was going to go get them. I will tell you, when we go up in the air, I probably see 40 civilian helicopters, and I might see 2 Blackhawks, National Guard, military, whatever they are. That's it. No one's out there doing rescues. I have my entire team up here from Florida right now, and they have no ability to go rescue these people other than what they can drive to. And the people that are in dire need.
I got to tell you, he goes on at length, and the question is, what is the federal government doing? North Carolina National Guard, Tennessee National Guard, Florida National Guard, Georgia National Guard, they've all been turned out, Virginia National Guard. Where are the feds? They're in an office that Kamala Harris visited, and they are not helping the people of North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia. You can help with Team Rubicon. You can help with the Salvation Army. It's all recommended. Be generous. Americans are suffering greatly. Kamala Harris promised people $750 gift cards. It's like they're dying. She is so clueless. She is so absolutely clueless. I think Trump's going to win, and I don't care what Jack Smith says where Judge Chutkan attempts to do. J.D. Vance mopped the floor with Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris is sitting around doing nothing about North Carolina, and Joe Biden trying to stop Israel from hurting Iran. It's a weird world. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Our friends at American Federal Gold and Bullion, AmFed Gold and Bullion in Phoenix, but operating throughout the United States, bring you this market update from yesterday. My friend Nick Grovich was on last week to explain why gold has gone up to $2,665 an ounce. If you're going to buy or sell gold today, call 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Or go to AmericanFederal.com. AmFed Gold and Bullion been in business for more than 40 years. Nick Grovich knows what he's doing. There's a small number of you out there who are collectors, and you can call up Nick and talk all day long about coins and stuff like that. But if you just want to buy gold because you're worried about the economy, you're worried about the fact, $2,665, the market isn't certain what Israel is going to do. Oil has gone up a little bit, but not much. So it doesn't seem like the market anticipates an attack on Carg Island or oil refineries or anything other than maybe the IRGC headquarters. I don't know what Israel's going to do. And you know what? I don't have any advice. Israel is up to Israel, and we will support them. When Joe Biden goes out there and says, please don't upset the Iranians, I can't believe it. But then again, he's not operating anywhere near full capacity, and he wasn't at full capacity. But I do think the Gates doctrine kicks in. When Joe Biden says, don't hit the nuclear facilities, you remember what former Secretary of Defense, former National Security Advisor, former head of the CIA, Robert Gates, who served both President Bush and President Obama, said? Joe Biden has not been right on any national security issue of import. This is a paraphrase. Maybe he said major national security issue in 40 years. When his memoir came out years later, I asked him, do you stand by that? He said, I stand by that. Joe Biden is never right. So if Joe Biden says to Israel, don't hit the Iranian nuclear facilities, what do you do if you're Israel and you know his record of being wrong about everything? You think about Abbey Gate. You think about him telling Putin, a minor incursion wouldn't really bother us, a little incursion. And you just think, he's been wrong about everything forever. You almost say, hit the nuclear facilities because Joe Biden said not to. They got to be asking themselves. Now, the Israeli Security Cabinet is 7 members. They're not loving each other, but they have a lot to do. You can't fire a second volley. The United States, Biden, Blinken, and Jake Sullivan held them back the first time Iran did this in April. But one man from Gaza, an Arab, was killed by the Iranians. Now, the Iranians will fight Israel to the last Arab, whether it's a Lebanese Arab, whether it is a Syrian Arab, whether it is a Palestinian, whether it is a Gazan, an Egyptian. They will march against Israel forever. But the IRGC hates it when Donald Trump blows up Soleimani or when Israel takes out other IRGC commanders in the bunker with Nasrallah. And so they fire off all these missiles. And gold is at $2,665 because it does not know what Israel's going to do. But it knows one thing: Iran can't respond. They lack the ability to respond. Ask yourself now, if Iran had a nuke, and they had any of those missiles, they've got ballistic missiles. They've sent more than 300 of them at Israel. If they can put one nuke and get close to somewhere in Tel Aviv, I saw a lot of videos on the way. I don't know what's true and what's not true. I saw the video of the Palestinian man from Gaza being killed. He was in the West Bank. When one of the missiles fell on him, the debris got shot down by Iron Dome. If they get one nuke through, what happens to Israel? Gone. One into Tel Aviv. Maybe 2. Maybe it would take 2 to utterly destroy and render uninhabitable. Israel has now been told what the Iranian intention is, and I think they are acting accordingly, and they're still probably deliberating. Might be all weekend. Rosh Hashanah yesterday, we are in the high holy days for our Jewish friends, and they're not listening to this show, and they're not doing their podcast, and I don't know, but Israel doesn't sleep. The security establishment doesn't sleep. As I said at the beginning of the show, 2nd Division of the IDF is now flooded into southern Lebanon. Trey Yinks is going to join me in the next hour. Trey is reporting, that's good news. Noah Rothman coming along as well, Jim Talent, to give us an update on politics and war. Politics and war. This is a month where my audience is extraordinary. The numbers are quite high, and the reason is quite simple, is that everyone wants to know what is going on. If you worry about jobless claims, we'll find out in hour 3 what has happened. We do know that Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, said the flood of illegal immigrants in the United States is raising the unemployment rate because they are doing the jobs that Americans want to do and therefore can't do because they're being paid under Jerome Powell said it. I didn't say it. And when the moderators attempted to fact check J.D. Vance, they were so wrong. Oh, the fact, poor CBS. I'm beginning to feel bad for Margaret Brennan and Nora O'Donnell. They got so slaughtered by everybody for their ham-handed attempt to prop up Tim Walz, and it could not be done. It's like holding up a Macy's air balloon that has fallen down after it got hit by a speeding bullet and just deflated in front of us. And J.D. Vance smoothly carried on, smiling and answering every question. Noah Rothman, senior writer for National Review. Good morning, Noah. The times are changing, and they changed pretty radically on Tuesday night when J.D. Vance stepped into the spotlight and dismembered Tim Walz. I have not yet listened to the editors, the National Review assessment of the debate. I'm not sure if you participated in that podcast. Did you?
I did not. I was on the road. I'm going on the road for a lot of October. Next, in 48 hours, I'm on a plane to Taiwan on a fact-finding mission. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be contributing as much to the editors podcast this month as I would like.
No, I'd be interested to find out what the Taiwanese think about this election. Well, Noah, what did you think of the debate?
I think I share the consensus opinion that it was something of a rout for J.D. Vance. Both candidates appeared on that stage and telegraphed pretty plainly what their mission was: soften the image. J.D. Vance did not come up on that stage as the bomb thrower that he had presented himself over the course of this campaign, and Tim Walz seemed like he had to project as much Minnesota nice as he was capable of summoning. I think J.D. Vance accomplished his mission, and Tim Walz did not. One of the things, though, that I think created a lot of this collegial atmosphere, it wasn't just strategy. It was strategy. There was a lot of that. But it was also the fact that one of the fundamental distinctions between Republicans and Democrats for my adult lifetime was not in evidence on that stage, and that is the distinction between these parties on the fundamental role of government. Is government capable of and has the capacity to engineer social outcomes that are desirable? We didn't actually ask that question. It was assumed on both parties' parts that it is. They differ on the margins, they differ on the outcomes, but they both fundamentally agree that government has a role in shaping society in desirable directions. I don't share that objective. I don't share that assessment. But these candidates do, and apparently both parties are of the same mind on whether big government is a desirable thing.
You know, I've heard Charles C.W. Cook on the editors say that. I am not at all persuaded of that, Noah, but nevertheless, it didn't come up. It didn't come up, and you might have had a better discussion had, and this is what I want to get to, Margaret Brennan and Nora O'Donnell not been so awful in their job of moderator. They were clearly, like the ABC debate, trying to help Tim Walz out. And I am cheered by the near universal condemnation of their job as moderators. Did you join in that near universal verdict?
I think the question selection was abominable. They framed the Israel question at the outset as a retaliatory response. One Tim Walz did not answer, and J.D. Vance did, albeit after a big digression in his biography. But they suggested that this was a retaliatory measure, a preemptive measure, not a retaliatory measure, which is improper framing. They pivoted to the disaster relief in the states that are hit hard by Helene and made it a climate change question, when we have a real live problem in these states that FEMA is responding to and that the federal government has a role in. And they pivoted away from an immediate contingency in that and instead to this theoretical exigency that is a perennial issue that has very little bearing on the lives of the people who have no power in North Carolina right now. I know a lot of Republicans are very frustrated by the cutting off of the mics. I don't think they should be. It did Jay Vance all the favors in the world. It gave him the opportunity to pivot to the moderators, to do what they want, what Republicans wanted Donald Trump to do in that debate, which was to emphasize the 3-on-1 dynamic and to suggest that he was capable of navigating a situation in which he's overmatched and overpowered just simply by numbers. And J.D. Vance punched his way out of that corner in ways Donald Trump did not. It was a scintillating performance from J.D. Vance. And I wonder if Republicans watching that understand now what it's like to have a professional communicator who is a powerful steward of their interests on that stage, as opposed to someone who's a big booming personality, who is as polarizing as he is enlivening, and who turns off as many as he appeals to. J.D. Vance had the opportunity there and demonstrated a capacity to grow the tent, to build the coalition out, to create a coalition, by the way, which would liberate politicians, Republicans and Democrats alike, from having to pander to their most antisocial, crankish elements because they can't lose a single vote. We're talking about 50+1, and this is the closest possible election ever. That sort of imagination, that creativity, liberates politicians to be able to create broader coalitions and gives them the liberty and the freedom to actually craft political proposals that appeal to broader constituencies. And that gives you the opportunity to back away from some of these, the pandering that we've seen, where they're appealing, both campaigns are appealing to the narrowest possible sliver of a demographic in a key community. Say, oh, we'll get rid of the taxes on tips. Oh, we'll get rid of your Social Security benefits. Oh, we'll give you free child health care. It's that sort of thing that just is trying to move the electorate like an algorithm. And just pitch this one element up and pitch this one element up. J.D. Vance demonstrated
No, that's interesting.
what a campaign that
they need to do that, though, Noah. It's going to be a 50% plus one vote. It might be a 10-vote election in one of these states. I don't know that we're going to know the winner of some states. Maybe we'll know the winner on election night if it is another 2016 or another 2020, but maybe we won't. We might have another 2000 Florida. What JD did was take the big Trump tent, which is already pretty doggone big, and made it bigger. And I think did so by emphasizing geniality. I've moderated a debate with JD before, and the senator at that time wasn't a senator. There were 6 candidates, including some very talented debaters, and he was very good. But what surprised me was he was winsome and gracious to Tim Walz. I think a lot of people were expecting him to go after the military record and other things like that, and he didn't. Now, Noah, that's in the bag. That's concrete. Vance wins, moderators lose, Tim Walz is lost. My question now is, what do you think Israel will do? Joe Biden, I'm using the Gates doctrine. Joe Biden is always wrong on every major national security issue for more than 4 decades. If we apply the Gates doctrine about Joe Biden said yesterday, don't hit Iran's nuclear sites. I am expecting Israel to hit nuclear sites now. What do you think?
I don't know, and I can't possibly guess. I saw one report yesterday that quoted 4 Israeli officials on background saying that a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities was not forthcoming. I can't judge that. What I can judge from my remove, and I'm not an expert on Israeli domestic politics, but you saw Naftali Bennett, former prime minister, come out and say, now is the time to hit these nuclear sites. We will not get another opportunity. Now, Democrats operate under the fantasy that the Netanyahu government is the problem, that the Netanyahu government is extreme, radical, very militant, and recalcitrant in ways that other political coalitions might not be. Naftali Bennett was the head of one of those other political coalitions. He was briefly prime minister under the blue and white in opposition to Likud. This is a demonstration of a consensus in Israel that Democrats simply reject, do not recognize, or probably just won't recognize, that the Israeli people want to see this threat neutralized, that the attacks on Israel by the Ring of Fire agents, Hamas, Hezbollah, the militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis are all symptoms of the disease, and the disease is Iran. This is an attack by a sovereign state on another sovereign state, requires a demonstrative attack in order to restore deterrence. And what Naftali Bennett is saying is probably reflective of the consensus in Israel on the ground, that it's time to restore deterrence through a demonstration of force that will raise the costs of aggressive action on Iran past the point at which it can absorb it. That is deterrence. It is the threat of force held in reserve.
And you have raised the reason I think it might be on the table. Netanyahu knows that his biggest threat is going to be Yoav Gallant and Naftali Bennett at the next election. And if he is less than they want now, he is exposed if he chooses to stand for re-election. So Noah, right. I had dialed in on the Naftali Bennett, hit the nuclear sites now. And I also think the all of the above menu is available to Israel. I want to give you would you be upset if they hit Cargill and they hit the IRGC and they hit the nuclear sites? Would you be upset?
Of course not. What I'm concerned about is logistical questions. Does the Israeli Air Force have the capacity to refuel over Iraq? Will we facilitate that? Does it have the ordnance necessary to penetrate these very deep, hardened institutions, places like Parchin and Fardo? I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows whether they have that capacity.
We didn't know about the beepers and the walkie-talkies, so I doubt we know about a lot of this stuff. 30 seconds, Noah.
No, I think that's true. My biggest question is, do they have capacity? Not the will. The will exists, the opportunity exists. Do they have the technical capacity? And will the United States facilitate that operation in really active material ways? I don't think it succeeds in the absence of United States support over the skies of Iraq, for example.
We will see. But I really have no idea. Like Noah, we are both admitting we have no idea. Watch that space, but watch it carefully. Do not be diverted by the Javert of America, Jack Smith, and his ally, Judge Chutkan. Pay attention to the real center stage in the world, which is what is going to go boom in Iran. Trey Yinks has been doing amazing work as a war correspondent for Fox News in Israel. Good morning, Trey. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm honored to have you on. That was some reporting yesterday. Tell us about where you were in Lebanon and with whom you were with.
Hugh, thank you for having me. Earlier this week, I got a call before the Israeli ground operation into Lebanon began that we might have an opportunity to join Israeli commandos as they went after a Hezbollah position. And when I got this call, I thought that it was a reconnaissance mission that we'd be joining and covering as part of our story and part of our reporting in the region. And it ended up that as this got underway, it was actually the larger ground operation that the Israelis were conducting against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And it was quite an experience. I've been on a lot of embeds over the past year. I've embedded inside Gaza 5 different times. But this was in the middle of the night. It was in territory I'd never entered before. And it was a very volatile environment. We had to cross minefields through densely populated forests. And then ultimately we made it to a location that was carved into the side of a mountain that the Israelis say Hezbollah was using to store weapons and personnel.
Trey, I found your interviews with the masked Israeli soldiers, and I don't know if they were commandos, if they were part of the 98th Paratroop or the 36th Division has entered today. Are you at liberty to tell us what unit you were with?
I'm not. And there are very few things I'll agree upon when it comes to these embeds. And I'll tell you what they are right now, actually, because I think it's important to discuss them publicly. There are basically 2 things that I agree to by going into Gaza or into Lebanon with the Israeli military. One is that I won't give up the location of their forces or the specific units I'm with if they make that request. And then 2 is that I won't show any sensitive screens or documents as we capture them in the course of our reporting. Other than that, the military has no editorial control over the coverage or the piece that I air.
Thank you for telling us that. I thought it was remarkable that they let you go. Now, tell me, have you been in the tunnels of Gaza? Because I would like a comparison, if it's possible, between the Hezbollah tunnels in Lebanon and the Hamas tunnels in Gaza. But to do that, you have to have been in both, and I know you've been at least in one in Lebanon.
Yeah, I've been in both. I entered the tunnel beneath Gaza's Shifa hospital with the Israelis last November and reported there. And if you look up that piece, you'll see that much like the piece I just did in Lebanon, it has proper context to what this means about that hospital and also the civilians that were affected inside Gaza as a result of the Israelis operating against the tunnel beneath Shifa. I also entered a more complex tunnel network beneath the second largest city in Gaza called Khan Yunis. And just to give you a comparison how these tunnels are different, you can tell that Hezbollah has the ability to dig deeper into the ground. They have heavier equipment, and they are able to tunnel into the side of mountains. Whereas the tunnels inside Gaza, some of them are dug by hand. They don't have this heavy equipment. And while they have cement and reinforcements that they place into the tunnel network, they are far more, I would say, basic than the tunnels inside southern Lebanon.
The piece that you published yesterday, and that people can find at Trey Yingst, and you can find Trey on X. He puts a lot of his reports there, or you can find him via Hugh Hewitt on X, because I linked and quote tweeted his post. It's rocky. I mean, it's granite. How in the world does the IDF propose? Did they even tell you? Are they going to destroy these tunnels? Because that's going to make a lot of the Lebanon landscape change if they try and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. They probably will ultimately destroy them in the way that they destroyed some of the tunnel network in Gaza. They'll send in these units who have specialized explosives, and then they leave them throughout different parts of the tunnel and then detonate the tunnel to make it implode on itself. They did this a number of times in Gaza. It does cause quite a bit of destruction above ground as well. And some of these tunnels are very far underground. You know, I've been reporting in this region for the past 6 years. I've entered Gaza and Lebanon without the Israeli military in the past, before this war began. And we've seen a lot of this infrastructure firsthand. And it's extensive. And it also complicates the battlefield because the Israelis are fighting a war above and below ground. Inside Gaza, it led to many ambushes. And already Israeli forces are starting to see, as we saw yesterday with 8 Israeli soldiers killed, it's a different environment to operate in. And from a war perspective, the Israelis knew this going into it, and they started this ground operation anyway. And as this develops, this is not going to be a limited raid. We're already seeing this is an expanded operation into southern Lebanon against Hezbollah.
Well, 2 divisions, and it continues to advance. I want to ask you, Trey Yingst. I know Lucas, so I know Lucas and how he goes back and forth. You've been there under some of the heaviest weather. I know Lucas and your other colleagues have been there under heavy weather as well. But where were you during the ballistic missile assault?
I was on a balcony in Israel's Haifa, the third largest city in Israel, and we were watching these ballistic missiles. Some of them get intercepted by the advanced Arrow 3 system, and others slamming into the ground below. I've lived here for the past 6 years, and so we've seen a lot, but the ballistic missile attacks are unique in many ways. And I would say the most significant is the fact that this attack came directly from Iranian territory. It was often considered the worst case scenario. And we also reported back in April, we were in Tel Aviv at the time watching ballistic missiles rain down on Israel back then. And I think it speaks to the broader sort of destabilization across the region, because the fact that Iran is directly firing on Israel means that we've taken another step up on the escalation ladder. And no longer is this just a war between Israel and Hamas inside Gaza, or an exchange of fire along the northern border between Israel and Hezbollah. This is already a broader regional conflict, and it has the real potential to unravel further than what we've seen already.
Now, some people are calling this the third Lebanon war, and I think that's a misnomer. I think it's the first Israel-Iran war. Trey Yingst, you were with combat soldiers on the front line 2 days ago. What are they telling you about what they hope the government does in response to the Iranian second attack on Israel with ballistic missiles? I'd like to know what the grunt in Israel thinks about what their government ought to do.
I've talked with Israeli officials as high up as the defense minister this week. I've also talked with soldiers who were entering on the ground as part of these commando units into southern Lebanon. And the sense is that this war is not anywhere close to being over. And I think that's a real misunderstanding in the United States when we talk about this conflict, that it's sort of coming toward an end. It's actually, as you noted, the beginning of a broader conflict, a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. And remember, the proxy organizations of Iran have been operating across the region for the past year, launching ballistic missile attacks and rocket attacks, and a variety of other border attacks, including anti-tank guided missile attacks. And these weapons aren't being made in southern Lebanon. They're being smuggled there through Syria, and the Iranian regime is providing the weapons. And so in terms of the soldiers, and even as high up as the defense minister, the sense is that there will be a heavy response against Iran. Officials that I talked to over the phone that are based in Tel Aviv, that are very close to the operations and decisions that are being made about this war, told me just after the ballistic missile attack that it's not a question of if Israel responds, but rather when and where. And the soldiers on the ground, their spirits are high, but they know they're going to take heavier losses in Lebanon. And I think yesterday was the best example of that. And it also sort of cuts to the Israeli psyche about what these conflicts mean. This is a very small country. It's less than 10 million people. So when 8 soldiers are killed during ground battles against Hezbollah, for example, like we saw yesterday, it affects the population in a different way than maybe a larger country would see if they lose 8 of their soldiers in combat.
Yeah, just multiply by 30 because the American population at 330 versus the Israeli population at 10 times 33 times 8, and that would be the equivalent loss of American military, and it would be stunning. Trey Yingst, you mentioned in your report yesterday, you went through a minefield in Lebanon. Can you tell us about that experience, how big it was, and how the Israelis obviously have extraordinary intel, but I've not. Dexter Filkins, John Fisher Burns, Tom Ricks, they've all been on the program. I don't know that any of them have ever gone through a minefield before.
Yeah, Hugh, I've been a lot of places and I've covered a lot of wars for the past decade. I was on the ground in Kyiv, Ukraine, as the Russians launched their invasion. I was in Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover. I was in southern Israel on the morning of October 7th. I just wrote a book about it. Going through a minefield on the border between Israel and Lebanon was definitely one of the scariest things that I've ever done. And we had very few instructions. It was dark, and all of the special forces that were around and the commando unit that we were with had night vision. We did not. And we were given basically one broad instruction, and that was to follow a white string and step into the footsteps of the person in front of you while staying 2 people apart. And they give you those instructions because if the person in front of you steps on a mine, they don't want it to kill you. And when you're getting these instructions in real time, you don't really have time to process what they're telling you. You just want to follow the commands so that you can preserve your life. But when you look back, it's clear that this is real. This is on the front lines, beyond the front lines of a conflict, walking into Hezbollah-controlled territory. Now, these mines were laid by the Israeli military to prevent Hezbollah from coming into northern Israel. But at this point in the conflict, in the middle of the night, the forces that we're with didn't lay the mines. They don't know exactly where they are. They're simply relying on that white piece of string or tape that is connected to a tree. And so we followed that. We crossed, and once we made it into southern Lebanon, it was quite intense hiking. We had to stop every so often and get down flat, sort of on one knee, and you could hear the buzz of Israeli drones overhead, and they were looking for heat signatures of Hezbollah fighters. And once the area was clear in front of us, we would move forward, and then the commander would get a signal. We would stop again, and in the distance, we could hear Israeli airstrikes as they were hammering different Hezbollah positions across the area. And so it was a very active scene. There were no engagements while we were with Israeli forces, no firefights that took place on that mission. But it does give you a sense of the type of terrain and territory that these forces are now operating in as they enter southern Lebanon.
Trey, I may have to take a break, and I want to talk to you in between the break if I can. Would you tell me, what was the elevation gain in terms of the march in? Because it sounds like it's a very rolling hill, but gradual elevation. Is that what you were in yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Initially, we went up a hill, and then when we crossed the border, we actually went down a riverbed, and this hadn't been cleared. Reconnaissance units clearly had gone through this area before. They had it mapped out where we were going, but we were going through brush and trees that had not been cleared. The Israelis were having to break branches and sort of crawl under things, and we followed them because this was the area that we were operating in, and we needed to just continue to move forward.
Trey Yingst reporting, and I appreciate all the time, Trey, from Israel this morning. Tell me, did the IDF engage Hezbollah terrorists in their incursion? Because I see a report this morning that 60 Hezbollah terrorists have been killed, 8 IDF soldiers have been killed. Was that a firefight? Were you near it?
On the mission that we were on, we were not near that firefight, and we actually didn't even hear any gunfire. We heard airstrikes in the distance. And that was very different to what we experienced during embeds inside Gaza when there were firefights that we were in the middle of between Hamas and Israeli forces.
So, Trey, my last question is this. You're a Keystone State person. You're a long way from Pennsylvania. Are you Are you wondering how you ended up there? Are you going to stay for the duration of the war, which could go another year? It might be October 7th, 2025, and we might still have the IDF fighting Hezbollah terrorists in the outskirts of Beirut, and we might have them further into Syria. It's impossible to say. Are you there for the duration?
Absolutely. I'll be here until the war is over. I feel a responsibility to be here on the ground to capture what's happening and bring these stories to the world. And you'll notice from my reporting, I take no sides in this conflict or any of the wars that we cover around the world. It's important for me to talk about Israeli civilians and those who were killed on the morning of October 7th when this war began. I also speak with Palestinian civilians inside Gaza on a regular basis to understand the suffering that they're experiencing amid this conflict. And the same goes for the northern front between Israel and Hezbollah. And you'll notice this as part of our reporting. It is a humans first style of coverage. And I do feel a responsibility to follow in the footsteps of the greats that came before me, the Edward R. Murrows, the Walter Cronkites, the people who did journalism the way that I think it should be done, to go to the front lines, to get the stories and bring them back to an audience in an objective and truthful way. And so I'll stay here.
What is your new book, Trey? When does it drop? When is it available?
So my new book actually came out literally while I was in southern Lebanon on October 1st, and it's called Black Saturday. It came out this week, and it's a firsthand account of my reporting in southern Israel on the morning of October 7th, and also a collection of my interviews with Israeli soldiers, with police officers, with civilians, with hostages who were released as part of the November ceasefire deal. I also speak with Hamas leadership, and I speak with Palestinian civilians, everyone involved in this story. And it gives the reader a real understanding of what happened on the morning of October 7th and also what the first 2 months of the war were like.
Black Saturday. Who's the publisher, Trey?
Publisher is HarperCollins, and it's a Fox News book.
Fox News book, Black Saturday by Trey Yingst. I will go to Amazon right now and order it, Trey, because I don't want to wait for the publisher to get it to me, but I appreciate your joining me this morning after I've read it. I hope you will come back. God be with you and stay safe. Thank you for spending time with not only the soldiers, but the civilians of the region. Trey Yingst of Fox News. Be well.
Thank you, Hugh.
Senator Jim Talent, retired, joins me now. Senator, I just talked to Trey Yingst. I also just posted the letter from national security professionals and Gold Star parents for former President Trump. You are a signatory to that letter. I'd like you to comment on what Trey Yingst said. I'd like you to comment on what you think Israel will do, and I'd like to comment on why you signed this letter. So hold forth, Jim, because there's a lot to cover here in 7 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Well, as far as what Trey said, it was fascinating, and it confirmed what we already thought, that this is going to be a difficult operation. But in the broader context view, I think Israel is in the middle, or rather they've finished the beginning and are now in the middle of what I hope and believe will be a huge strategic victory for the West, not just for Israel. And they're doing it despite the opposition of the Biden administration, which continues to believe that Iran is a potential friend and partner in the Middle East. And that has hamstrung everything that's happened in the last 3.5 years. And so now, what are the Israelis going to strike? I don't know. I think when Noah said this morning that he didn't know, he was speaking for all of us. I do think, however, that the Israelis understand that this is probably not going to be the last exchange between Iran and Israel. And so they're going to decide what they do now with a view towards what they're planning to do later. I'm with you. I would love to see them hit the Karg port, for example. And they may be planning to do that, but they may be planning that for later rounds. I'll also say to you that there's an opportunity for an even greater strategic victory if the United States would follow up on this and reimpose Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. And in addition to that, really support and succor the dissidents in Iran, because I think the regime could be in a great deal of trouble if they continue suffering these foreign policy losses, given what's happening at home. And there is a possibility that the Iranian people, who are sophisticated and cosmopolitan people, may do what they've wanted to do for years, which is get rid of the mullahs. Now, what was the second
Senator
question?
Talent, We have E2s and AWACS available in the region. They had to have helped participate in the defense of Israel. Do you expect that they will participate in the response of Israel to Iran's direct attack?
No, certainly not under this administration. And look, I will agree that whether or not the United States should take offensive action against Iran is a question that reasonable people can disagree over. I mean, the basis for doing it would have been that their proxy seized 5 Americans. Now, that's a casus belli against the United States. Their proxies are attacking American proxies. So that would be the basis to do it. What Israel needs from us more than anything else, and that the Biden administration refuses to provide, is firm and consistent support for their narrative, particularly in the international forums. That's the only domain in which they have not been consistently winning, is the narrative domain. That's what they need. Yes, you asked. Do you want me to answer the question about the letter?
Yes.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think that Donald Trump was the best foreign policy president we've had since at least H.W. Bush, maybe Reagan. I think he consistently pursued hard-headed, common sense policies. He showed tactical brilliance in a number of circumstances, and the Middle East is the classic one. I mean, the Abraham Accords, in which he and his people recognized that, look, the argument in the Middle East is not about the Palestinians. It's about Iran and its aggressive tendencies, and it's possible to pull together a coalition of all those who are concerned about Iran, which includes the Gulf states, Egypt, Jordan, as well as Israel. And they were well on the way towards doing it, and I think would have completed it. He got us out of the defense sequester, began rebuilding the American armed forces, understood that we needed a bigger Navy, and all of this tended towards peace, which was the thrust of the letter. In other words, the Trump administration conceived and executed a sensible and workable peace through strength agenda. And I think he can again if he's elected. And that's why I signed the letter, and I was happy to do it. And I just hope he gets the opportunity to do that after January.
I have posted the letter over at HughHewitt.com. It took a long time to get onto HughHewitt.com because there are so many signatories of the caliber and stature of former Senator Talent and Mike Pompeo and Robert O'Brien. I want to thank you for circulating and signing on to that, because there's another letter out there with another group of distinguished Americans who support Kamala Harris. That's fine. I think it will be a disaster for this country if she's elected. Jim Talent, 30 seconds. What did you make of J.D. Vance and Tim Walz?
Well, I felt vindicated, because remember when you were asking who ought to be vice president, and I said the number one thing was a good communicator. Well, he did an outstanding job of explaining why Donald Trump had succeeded in his first administration, why he would succeed in the next. He did an outstanding job critiquing Kamala Harris, and I think he offered hope, and I think that was very important.
I have just posted over at HughHewitt.com a letter from some 60 national security, foreign policy professionals and military veterans of the highest order, as well as Gold Star family members from Abbey Gate, endorsing the re-election of Donald Trump. One of the signatories is Ambassador Robert O'Brien, President Trump's last national security advisor, and Alex Gray, a 4-year veteran of the Trump White House, and his last job there was as Chief of Staff to Ambassador O'Brien. They both join me now. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for sending me the letter, and thank you for allowing me to post it. Ambassador O'Brien, I know you have 60. I assume more people will be signing on as this goes on. Why did you do this? I guess I can't hear Ambassador O'Brien. Alex Gray, are you with me?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Well, I can't hear Ambassador O'Brien, so why don't you tell us, Alex, what is the origin of this letter?
Well, thanks again, Hugh. We have almost 360 signatories now. We've got about 25 cabinet or cabinet equivalent officials. We've got folks who served from President Nixon all the way to President Trump. And our point in doing this was twofold. One was to push back on this narrative that you get in Washington and from the mainstream media that there aren't credible people with credentials and experience and vision who are willing to serve President Trump in a second term. We all know that media narrative is out there, unfortunately, and it's manifestly not true. This letter is a refutation of that. It's a cabinet and a sub-cabinet in waiting. And second, we wanted to push back by showing that we all know, every average American knows from what they see before their eyes, just the world is in fire under President Biden and Vice President Harris, and we know how much different that is from the world of Donald Trump's first term. And we thought that if we put together a group of folks who have firsthand experience of foreign policy and national security, we could make it a little clearer for people that, hey, there's an alternative. We don't have to be in this current environment that we're unfortunately in as a country.
Ambassador O'Brien, I hope you can hear me now. I know you've signed on to it. The iteration I had of the letter had only 60 people. Alex Gray tells me we're up to 360. Is the letter open for signature by people who are qualified to sign it? That means a credentialed national security, foreign policy, and of course, Gold Star families.
It is, Hugh. Thank you. And a happy New Year to all our Jewish friends who are listening to the show for Rosh Hashanah. It's 360 people. And I've gotten, when I opened my email this morning, half a dozen very senior officials who, for some reason, weren't on our email list or fell through the cracks, and they're asking that their name be attached to it. I think it's going to be 500 people, but by the time that this is republished in a week or so, it's the response has been tremendous. Look, the idea, Hugh, and you and I have spoken about this on your show before. Peace through strength works, and we had peace. Peace through strength doesn't mean counting how many aircraft carriers you have. It means what are the results of American strength in the economy, diplomacy, and the military. And we saw peace deals with the Abraham Accords. We saw Serbia, Kosovo. We saw a great deal that kept Americans from being killed in Afghanistan that unfortunately went to pieces when this administration took over and reversed all the Trump policies. We saw the healing of the Gulf Rift in the Persian Gulf. So we saw Iran, Pakistan, and we saw many American hostages come home without paying ransom. And so it's just a very different world we live in today, and that's one of the points we're trying to make, as Alex so aptly explained.
People need to go and read the letter. Take a look. Again, the iteration of the letter I have has only got 60 names on it. It's up to 360. I imagine it'll be 500 before the end of the day. And I'm sure Ambassador O'Brien, Alex Gray will have available to members of the media the full list of people who have signed. Mr. Ambassador, Israel was attacked for the second time by Iran. They are going to respond. Joe Biden is once again doing his best to detail to Bibi Netanyahu and his security cabinet how to respond. J.D. Vance, by contrast, said, whatever Israel does, we should support. What's your position on the Israeli response to the second Iranian attack? It's sort of stunning to be talking about 180 ballistic missiles fired at Israel from Iran, but that's where we are.
Yeah, this has happened twice now, Hugh, and for some reason, there's some leftists and appeasers that think because Israel and the United States and our allies had the capacity to stop the attack, to shoot down the missiles, that somehow Iran is less culpable for launching a massive barrage of ballistic missiles twice now at the state of Iran, or at the state of Israel. And had those missiles hit, Israel would have been devastated. And so, look, the free pass that the Biden administration and the prior Obama-Biden administration and the Biden-Harris administration now has given Iran for their terrorism, for their attacks on Israel, that has to end. Israel has to teach Iran a lesson, and we need to be all in supporting Israel and whatever it decides to do to defend itself and to deter Iran from launching a third wave of missiles at it.
Alex Gray, as a former chief of staff of the National Security Council, I want to get nuts and bolts from you, not high strategy, though you can do that as well. How do people find, if they want to put their name on this letter and they are credentialed, how do they find you?
They should reach out directly to me. And we've circulated the letter to a number of folks, as I said, people who have served in every Republican administration and Democratic administrations as well, going back to President Nixon. We're more than happy to talk to anyone who's interested. And again, Hugh, the point of this letter is not a partisan one. The point of this letter is to show that there's a really broad consensus that the policies that President Trump supported, peace through strength policies, as Ambassador O'Brien mentioned, that's the direction we need to move to as a country. And so anyone who has real experience in foreign policy, national security, the military, the intelligence community, we want to have your support for returning to President Trump's vision.
Ambassador O'Brien, I don't know how the media is going to react, but the first name I know is, of course, Secretary Pompeo and you, but Bill Barr signed on. And Bill Barr is, not a fan of the former president. They bounce each other around a little bit, but Bill Barr is very clear-eyed about the choice here. Are you finding that from people who've had their differences with the former president, but are stepping up to say, look, this is about the world and we need peace through strength?
We are, and Bill Barr said this at an event I was at recently, that he and President Trump obviously have their differences that have been very public, and there's been some name-calling back and forth. But Bill Barr said the most important thing to him is to have judges who support the Constitution of the United States appointed to the federal bench, and he knows that that'll happen under President Trump in a second term. He also said that he wants people like Mike Pompeo and others back in the administration to have a foreign policy that deters our adversaries and deters our friends. And so you've got, on this letter, I won't point them out, but there are people who resigned on January 6th who've signed. There are people like Ed Meese from the Reagan administration. There are political opponents to the president like Nikki Haley, who ran against him, who signed. And then, of course, the successful cabinet members, Steve Mnuchin and Rick Perry and John Radcliffe and Bob Lighthizer, who was a great trade rep. So Zal Khalilzad, Kelly Craft of the UN. It's just it's a broad range of former cabinet secretaries and admirals, generals, State Department officials, again, crossing.
And the Gold Star families. I thought that was a very wise thing to do, to begin with the cabinet rank and then put the Gold Star families from Abbey Gate there, Alex Gray. I'm very glad you honored him in that way by pointing out that there are real world consequences to weakness, and they are the victims of that. Were they willing to come? They've taken a lot of incoming for being very vocal. Were they very quick to sign on?
They were some of the quickest to sign on, frankly, Hugh. And you're right. It's a reflection of the fact that there are real world consequences to these policies that get cooked up in Washington. And weakness is provocative, strength deters, and weakness has real consequences for families and for Americans across the country. And we were really honored that in addition to the names Ambassador O'Brien mentioned, we had these families who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, who have lost their sons and daughters and loved ones because of the policies that have come out of this administration. And so we wanted to honor them by putting them towards the top of the letter, and we wanted to make sure that the people who are reading this letter understand that changing policies has real world implications for people across this country.
Quick last question, Ambassador O'Brien. Every George Ensign on every old LCS has said what they think about Donald Trump, and the media picks it up. Do you think the media will follow this letter and report on it? We got 10 seconds.
Well, I hope so. They certainly said what disgruntled former cabinet secretaries and some, discredited former officials have said. This is a list of the best, and I hope they publicize it.
Very impressive. I've got the first iteration of Only 60. It's posted at HughHewitt.com. Senator Deb Fischer has represented the great state of Nebraska for 12 years. She's in a re-election mode right now. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back. Good to see you again. How goes the campaign on the ground in Nebraska?
Well, good morning, Hugh. Yes, we're in a close race here in Nebraska, and working hard and getting our message out. So it's great to be on with you today.
Well, I'm posting over at X right now your campaign website so that people can help out. You are being challenged by a union guy who's running as an alleged independent. He's a lefty. How is the money? Is the dark money coming in against you in big gobs like it is everywhere else?
Most definitely it is. This is a Democrat who's trying a new plan in a red state, and he is running as an independent. He got on the ballot as an independent. The vast majority of his money is coming from very big Democrat donors, Kamala Harris donors, from Union. He gets a lot from Act Blue. And so we are continuing to fight. We're raising a lot of money. We have great endorsements. Former coach Osborne of the Cornhuskers, he came out with a really strong ad that he wrote for me, and it's on the radio. So we have great people behind us, great volunteers, and continue to define who this guy is and just what he does stand for.
Now, Senator Fisher, a lot of my listeners like to make small dollar donations and spread around their investments. You're the only incumbent other than Senator Cruz I've had on, because you and Senator Cruz are the two that Democrats think they can maybe, in a perfect storm, grab. I don't think they can get either of you, but it nevertheless, insurance policy time. You serve on armed services. You know what the state of the nation's military is. I am afraid if we go with another 2 years under Senator Schumer, that and a President Harris, that the military will suffer dramatically. What is your sense of what's ahead if we don't get back control of the Senate and if the White House stays in Democrat hands?
Well, I am on Armed Services Committee. I am the second highest ranking Republican on that committee. And we fully understand the threats that this country faces. You talk about them on your show quite often, Hugh, and thank you for bringing attention to that. I believe when the American people understand the threats that we have, they will support our military even more. They will support what we need to do to not just keep our homeland safe, but to keep the world safe as well. We provide well for our military men and women when we do our NDAA bill every year. There's a 4.5% increase in there for our all volunteer military. But we also need to continue to provide them with the resources they need. And right now, we're able to do that, but I'm worried under a Democrat controlled Senate and possibly a continuation of the Biden Harris administration, we won't see that commitment made for our national security that we would and that we know we would have with a Republican majority.
I just had Ambassador O'Brien, the last national security advisor under President Trump, on. He and Alex Graves circulated, in 400 defense and national security professionals and the Abbey Gate parents have signed on endorsing President Trump. And I'm glad to have you on talking about the national security as well, because right now Israel is figuring out what to do. And President Biden is once again telling them, don't do what you want to do. What do you think about that? J.D. Vance, your colleague, said, whatever Israel does, we'll support. What do you think, Senator Fisher?
Well, how many times does Iran have to show their true colors before Democrats learn the lesson? Every time Democrats unfreeze sanctions or funds, and when they relieve sanctions, we see more aggression coming from Iran. We've learned that lesson, but Democrats haven't. So they still do it time after time, year after year, administration after administration. Right now, we are seeing the stakes that they couldn't be higher, Hugh. You recently had an op-ed out, which I thought hit it right the nail on the head, because it shows that Israel is finally forging their own path forward that they have to do. And they have to do it because it's necessary to protect their people.
I just had Trey Yingst on from Haifa. He was in southern Lebanon, embedded with the IDF. And this war could go on another year. And the United States just has to stop crippling Israel's initiative. Senator Fisher, I want to close by explaining to people, it sometimes startles people that Deborah Fisher from Nebraska and John Thune from South Dakota and Senator Kramer from North Dakota are all involved in strategic affairs. And it's because all of our Minutemen are up there. Do you want to explain why Nebraska and South Dakota and North Dakota, the Plain States, care so much about defense?
Well, I think it's because basically we've had a front row seat for over 70 years. We understand the absolute power of being able to have a deterrence. And part of that deterrence is in our states. It's the ground force. The ICBMs are there. But we understand the stakes. We understand how it is the bedrock of our security to have a strong deterrence, a strong triad, not just for, again, our own protection, our own national security here in the homeland, but we provide that secure umbrella for our allies as well. And we have to make sure that we continue to modernize our deterrence and continue to make sure that we protect this country.
Last question, Senator Fisher. Iran was unhappily surprised that some of their ballistic missiles, they're not intercontinental, they're ballistic missiles, though, failed. I'm not sure when we last tested our ICBMs. Do you think we're modernizing them and keeping them up to pace? And do we need to increase the expenditure on that part of the triad?
Well, we're in a modernization mode right now for all three legs of our triad. And dealing with our ICBMs, we are continuing to move forward on the Sentinel program, which is the new missile that's coming out to replace the Minuteman III. So as long as we are able to stay on schedule with the Sentinel program, to be able to make sure that our land-based leg of the triad is going to be secure, we're going to be able to be fine. But we really cannot afford to fall behind in that modernization program. And my colleagues such as John Thune and Kevin Kramer, who is really a champion on this, we all are strong advocates for that.
I want to send everyone to Deb for Nebraska, DEBFOR Nebraska.com, debfornebraska.com. Small donation goes a long way to defending the country. Senator Fisher, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
I will. There are these plain state senators know more about defense than, everyone expects the folks in Lindsey Graham land who have always been on the newspapers and on the Sunday shows talking about, with the late John McCain and others, about how we need to fight here and there and supply here. But then you get these plain state senators, and they are extraordinarily well-versed and committed to national defense. Deb Fisher is so solid on this, and Nebraska, don't fall for this independent union guy. It's just, that would be terrible. I want to play for you again Doug Murray. Douglas Murray is an amazing Brit, and he was on with Barry Weiss on the Honestly podcast yesterday, cut number 51. It's about Israel and about what we ought to be doing for and with Israel, not against Israel.
It's possible once again to see what the Middle East could look like if these two delusions fell away. If instead of everyone obsessing about the Palestinians getting another state, they thought about improving the living conditions of the Palestinians. If instead of talking about the importance of bringing Iran in from the cold, the mullahs in from the cold, we talked about if Washington had spent 1% of the time it has spent trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of power in Jerusalem, trying to get the mullahs out of power in Tehran, the mullahs would be out of power in Tehran by now. Every American government for 30 years has been trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of office. Bill Clinton sent teams of people over to get Netanyahu to lose the election in the 90s. When Netanyahu says in his memoirs, Bill Clinton calls him up to congratulate him after he wins the prime ministership, gets together the coalition, and Bill Clinton says, well, we did everything we could to keep you out, but we're looking forward to working with you. Okay, but the point is that it has been American government policy to change the prime minister in Israel. Whatever you think of him, he's the one who can put together coalitions. What have they done when the Iranian people took to the streets like in 2009? Nothing. So if you didn't have that terror regime oppressing the people of Iran and spreading their terror around the region, look at what's possible. Look at what's possible. Look at what Bahrain has achieved in recent years. Look at what Saudi has been able to achieve in recent years. There are developments in Saudi Arabia I never thought would be seen in generations in terms of liberalization. Now, does it yet look like Berkeley? No, thank God. And I always like to think there might be somewhere in liberal terms between Riyadh and Berkeley, and if we can find that civilizational G-spot, let's do it.
Douglas Murray and the Free Press and Barry Weiss, great there's a new generation of people rising, like Guy Benson and Mary Catherine Ham and Aaron Chadburn, if you're listening in Portland, for example. There's a new generation of commentators and analysts rising. We're going to pick up the ball and run with it. And the new hitch is Doug Murray. And Douglas Murray is fabulous. And Trey Yinks is great. And I just think there's a generation of clear-headed people coming up to speak the truth. I'm not worried at all about when I hang up the spurs, and whether it's 4 or 6 years, whenever I'm done, God willing, it goes that long. There's great talent coming behind me. In the meantime, I want you to go over to Highly Concentrated Hugh, listen to everything you missed today, and make sure that you also go over to hughhewitt.com. You can always watch the show or listen to the show just by going to my website. You can download the Salem News Channel app, yes, but if you can't find it, or you just are at the desktop and you want a better signal, go over to hughhewitt.com. You can listen to it all the time. People ask me all the time, how do I listen to you? I said, well, you can always get me in the car if you've got your local affiliate, or if you've got your phone with you, or anything. Just go to hughhewitt.com, hit listen now or hit watch now, and you can. Let me also remind you, if you want to join us, Mike Gallagher, Dennis Prager, the rest of us out on the road, head over to battlegroundtour.com. I'm going to start in Detroit. I'm going to end in Pittsburgh. Gallagher's going on. Gallagher will talk to anyone. He'll sing anywhere anyway. But I want you to come out and let's talk about the election ahead of us. Battlegroundtour.com. Carrie Lake joins me from Arizona. Her website is carrielake.com, KARILAKE.com, and she needs your help. Carrie Lake, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm ready for another day. We're counting down to Election Day, and ballots are dropping here in Arizona on, they land in mailboxes on October 9th. So we're moving fast. Every minute counts, and we're not wasting a single minute. So I'm
Are
really,
you in margin of
honored to
error
have you on.
territory now, Carrie Lake? Because I think I saw one last night that put you in margin of error territory.
This is a margin of error race. Public polling shows that margin of error. My internal polling shows me up slightly. But we're going with it tied, and we're acting like we're tied or behind, and we're working really hard to make sure that we just let everybody know not only what I want to do, which is secure the borders, bring back a strong economy, make sure our streets are safe, and bring peace, not war, to the world. And my opponent is just the opposite: open borders, pro-sanctuary city, wanted to defund the police nationwide. He is for, biological men competing in sports with our daughters and our sisters. Every crazy idea you can imagine, he's voted for. He's voted with Biden and Harris 100% of the time. I don't know that there's another person in Congress who's that radical. He's even further to the left than the Squad and AOC and Bernie Sanders.
I want people to know that if Carrie Lake wins, Arizona has a serious person representing a big and important state. And if her opponent wins, he would be the most radical member of the United States Congress. He is an open border guy. I mean, he's declared it, Carrie Lake, hasn't he?
Yeah. He called the border wall dumb and stupid and useless, said he would never put a penny toward it. He voted recently, more than once, he's voted to give everyone who's poured across in this invasion asylum, which means they become citizens, and also the ability to vote, including voting in this upcoming election. They realize, the Democrats do, and people like Ruben Gallego, my opponent, that their policies are not wanted, nor are they liked by the American people. And the only way they can remain and hold power is to import millions of illegals and let them vote so that they can stay in power.
Now, Carrie Lake, we are on right now in Phoenix and Prescott. We'll be on later today in Tucson. I am just curious, do you have the volunteers you need, and do you need the small dollars from across the country at carrielake.com?
Well, let me start with the dollars and donations. We are up against a guy who has all the money in the world. He's funded by all the usual suspects, including the Soros family. He's constantly hanging out with the Soros folks, and that's why he's running so many ads. You'll see him on the air here in Phoenix. In a regular commercial break, you might see 5 ads for him. It's outrageous how much money he has, and we're just being outspent. This is the case across the country. So every little bit helps. We want to get out there and define who he is so people know that they can't believe what he's putting in his ads. We have to tell them what he's really about. And so every little bit counts. $5 or $10 will help. CarrieLake.com. If you can give more than that, I understand we're living in Kamala Harris's economy, and it's not easy. We've got a great team and lots of volunteers. We're knocking on thousands of doors every week. I'm telling people to get involved. I really think that Turning Point Action's doing a great job here in Arizona. And if you know anybody around the country who wants to come to Arizona for the month of October and knock doors, and we're calling it Chase Ballots, go to tpaction.com/100 and sign up to chase 100 ballots. If we all get out and get those ballots that land in people's mailboxes, make sure they get filled out and sent back in, then we're going to win this. It's going to be a voter turnout win. That's how we win. We make sure people get out and vote. We're going to vote early. I want people to vote early this time. There's so much happening in the world. You never know how much more is going to happen before Election Day. We want those ballots in as quickly as possible.
Carrie Lake, I want people to know, I've been on in the air in Arizona for 25 years, and every single Arizonan I know, and you can start with John Kyle, the great John Kyle, John Shadig, Doug Ducey, every single person I know in Arizona is backing Carrie Lake. You've got to be happy with the unified GOP behind you and the independents behind you. But a lot of money, Carrie Lake. It's an expensive series of media markets. Tucson and Phoenix are expensive.
Yeah, they sure are. I mean, it reaches a lot of people. The reason it's so expensive is because the Phoenix market reaches about 85% of the state, so you spend a lot of money. But we have to get the ads up. Maricopa County is the county. 65% of our entire state population lives in one county here. So we're working hard. We're taking our bus tour all over the state over the next month, and we are going to be making sure we reach as many voters as possible. The biggest thing we have to do is make a plan to vote and get out to vote. The Democrats are motivated right now, but I believe the Republicans and independents who are tired of this terrible economy, this wide open border, and all the problems we have are even more motivated to get out and vote.
Carrie, good to talk to you. CarrieLake.com. Go and support. The road to a Senate majority runs through Arizona. Head over to CarrieLake.com to help her out.